Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this one, we're going to be doing a dual katana build. This is going to be using two Nagakibas. You can use two of the standard katanas as well, and we're going to be working on a blood and frost build for this one to get a lot of damage out of them. So initially, I tried different things. I ended up going for lightning and a couple of different affinities, and the most damage, obviously, that I ended up with was for bleed, bleed. But unfortunately, with bleed, bleed, I'd recommend the scavengers, bandit curved swords, twin blades, a whole bunch of other stuff over the katanas. So for this, I chose to go with Bleed and Frost to mix it up, have a little bit of fun, and take advantage of the fact that the Nagakibas have relatively good damage in AR. Big selling point here is if you want a katana build. I had a lot of people on my channel asking me for a dual katana build to basically try to come up with something between the two, and I did try a bunch of different affinities, several different Ashes of War, and it ended up going with Seppuku and Chilling Mist for the most damage that I can get aside from Bleed Bleed, while also changing it up a little bit and going for the Frost procs, which are really fun to get too. Now, admittedly, I did get beat up a little bit trying these out for the first time because I was so used to the jump attacks and whatnot, and I wanted to build obviously around the katanas, and in this instance, we're going to be using L1 a lot, and it was a little bit to get used to try to get the consecutive or successive attack damage build up, but when you do, it is substantial damage. You can get the Bleed proc, you can get the Frost proc, and it adds up to a lot of damage in general, a really solid build. For this build, you can go with the standard katana or the Nagakibas. I like the Nagakibas a lot. The 18 strength that you need for them is a little bit of a hefty requirement, but even with that said, they do have a good amount of damage, and on top of that, the reach on them is absolutely fantastic. So for me, I went with dual Nagakibas for this build, but obviously you can use the standard katanas as well for a lot of damage too. By the way, I wanted to mention real quick early in this one, we have a Discord that's been going like crazy lately. There's a ton of people in there. There's literally over 200 people talking, trading, playing Elden Ring together. It's been absolutely fantastic. So be sure to join that. And while you're at it, definitely hit that subscribe button too. Back to our katana build. Another thing that I would like to mention about the katanas, by the way, is katanas, obviously, I know this is just a matter of opinion, but they're really cool to use. And the Nagakiba, if you're willing to kill Hunter Yura in the beginning of the game, that's up to you. It depends, I guess, how his quest ends up. But if you do kill him early on, he'll drop the Nagakiba for you. You can combine that with your standard katana, and you got a good setup right from the beginning of the game. And then you can put Bloody Slash on one, and Chilling Mist isn't even that far away. It's in the Journey of the Lakes, which you can get shortly after, and basically start this build very early and very powerful. Speaking from experience, can honestly carry you through a good portion of the game, because if you're using a Nagakiba, standard katana, or whatever, you get some of the good Ashes of War that are in the game, or even use something like Bloody Slash in combination with Chilling Mist, especially on a first run, you're going to be able to shred the majority of the bosses that you run through in the game, because most aren't Bleed and Frost immune, immediately chew through their HP, and make every fight relatively quickly. Again, this is on New Game Plus 7, so everything's particularly tanky. We have our weapons at plus 25, obviously, but as you can see here, we're doing pretty good damage with the katanas. And now where it really shines, there's the fight with Radahn that I should have mentioned earlier in the video, because this is a really good fight in general. This is something that honestly is pretty epic because it's on New Game Plus 7, and I was surprised at the damage the katanas were able to do with Bleed and Frost. And honestly, totally aware that Bleed and Frost is quite good and everything, but it's the fact that I was able to do so much damage so quickly, and the mass amounts of damage or chunks of HP that came off Radahn very quickly, and then shortly after this move where he does his first phase, I guess technically speaking, before he goes up for the meteor, we're able to take him down entirely by shredding through his HP again, getting the Bleed proc, getting the Frost proc as well, and being able to absolutely shred through his HP, because don't forget, every time you get Frost on an enemy, unless you're resetting it with fire, you're able to get additional damage. You're going to get additional damage on that enemy for the duration of the Frost, so that helped there. As you can see, my damage continually went up, and then we got the Bleed procs on top of everything, absolutely destroying his entire HP bar. Let's go on to the Draconic Tree Sentinel. The Draconic Tree Sentinel actually has decently stout resistances. I believe his Bleed and Frost are somewhere around 500 to begin with. I don't know the exact for Frost, but I know he's a little bit stout as far as at least Bleed goes, so it takes a minute to get the procs, but once we do, once again, we're doing additional damage, we're able to get those Bleed procs still, and we're able to shred his HP, despite the fact that he has pretty stout resistances in general. And that was when I was like, katanas can be quite good. And I know that seems obvious, but since we're running around a lot doing the jump attacks, doing the meta stuff, in this instance for us, we're able to take the katanas and to turn them into something good. And I know some people were looking for a katana build. This was something that I came up with. I tried different things. Like I said earlier in the video, there were several different affinities, Ashes of War, all kinds of things that I tried. I did an unsheathed one recently. That was cool for posture damage, but for general damage and build up, the best way is obviously bleed. But if you're going to go pure bleed, there's a lot of other options with the jump attacks and whatnot. So for me, I really like Bleed Frost on the katanas, and it takes advantage of the Nagakiba's reach, of the Nagakiba's damage, and in general just taking advantage of the whole build, how we're building up on those successive attacks with Millicent's Prosthesis, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, the Thorny Tier, everything that we need to build up a lot of damage with this build. Now, after this clip, by the way, this was just to show off on mobs, which it's relatively good against. As far as an entire group, like an entire group of mobs, it might be a little bit difficult depending on what Ash of War you're using, but singularly, as far as enemies go, they're very, very easily taken down. Now, as far as bleed immune enemies, especially with the tree avatars, you can still get frost on them, and you can still build up a lot of damage. They're not going to take the bleed damage, but as you can see there, we tore down his HP extremely quickly with the katanas. Let's get into equipment. Now, after we're going to talk about stats, I'm going to talk about how I tried the Nagakiba both in Blood and on Occult. For this, we were using it on Occult, and then we have the other one with Chilling Mist, obviously Seppuku on the original one, White Mask, we have the Sanguine Noble Robe, Random Set on, Lord of Blood's Exultation, Millicent's Prosthesis, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Dragoncrest, and then we have the Thorny Tier and the Faith Tier for buffs as well. Now, here are my 150 stats. Everything on here is good except for the fact that whether you're going to run it on Occult or Blood. I'm going to talk about the differences now. If you're going to run it on Occult, then you go minimum strength, minimum dex, and as much arcane as possible. If you're going to go for Blood, then you go for dex and arcane. I tried both. I had success with both. I think there was a little more bleed build up, obviously, with Blood, but the damage was really good on Occult, and since it has innate bleed, it's a really good option to go Occult, see how high you can get Arcane to go, see how much damage and bleed you can get without sacrificing damage on the Blood affinity. Now, for buffs, we're just doing a couple simple things. We're drinking our Tier, and then we're going to use Golden Vow. You can throw in Blessing's Boon if you want some extra HP over time, and then we're going to use Flame Grant Me Strength, and then we're going to fill up our FP. And then we're going to use, I'm on Xbox, Y and L1, and then Y and R1 back. We get both the Frost coating as well as Seppuku, the Ash of War itself, which adds additional bleed to the weapon. And again, if you're running Occult, it's very, very good to have Seppuku, but you can also run it for Blood for a little bit more bleed as well. Again, that's up to you. As far as this build goes, this was a really fun one. Katanas are really fun to use, and the Nagakibas are one of my favorite weapons in the entire game. Really like the reach and the style that they have in general, and as I mentioned earlier in the video, there's an awesome Discord that you have to check out. There's a ton of people in it now. It's incredibly active, so be sure to check that out. If you love overpowered PvE builds, be sure to check out all the awesome builds that are on my channel. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will catch you guys there.